Hi, today I'm talking to Katie from Horizon Therapy in Dundalk. Katie, you're an occupational therapist, is that right?
I am, yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat to me today. So you've been following our journey at Awesome Training for a while. Can you remember like when you first came across Awesome Training?
I do. I remember it really well because it was a bit of an eye-opening experience for me. I had been following autistic pages on social media, mostly with autistic-led pages, and one of your posts popped up about stimming, and it had listed 8 functions of stimming,
Yeah.
and I really got drawn to that because as an occupational therapist, we're very interested in function and meaningful occupation. So that word kind of drew me in initially. It was a handwritten 8-point list, and there was 8 points about what stimming is and why autistic people stim, why people in general stim. So I shared it on our social media, and then you commented underneath, and I got sucked in then, and I got so interested in like the autistic experience of being autistic as opposed to an observer's experience of an autistic person from the outside. So it was really exciting to get all this information coming from the inside, and that was what really sucked me in. And then I got interested in your conference, which was supposed to run last year, and then I have attended every webinar since as a result.
I think you have actually done all of our courses and webinars.
I'm very happily.
What?
Very happily so.
Yeah, thank you. But like what? So maybe for people who don't know anything about Awesome Training, like what webinars did you do, or kind of what did you find most beneficial as a professional?
I think the first one is what autism is and isn't, and that was with yourself and Kieran Rose. You went through the history of autism, and you went through present day information about autistic experiences. That was a real eye opener for me because obviously as a health professional, I was taught a lot of information that was kind of very clinical, very medical model about autism, and it really kind of broadened my mindset as to what autism actually is from an autistic perspective. And the lived experience of what it is to be an autistic person, and it's very different to a lot of what the narrative is around autism, and that's what's exciting and necessary.
Yeah, and I think that's like, for me as a trainer, someone who's trying to educate people, I see courses like 3 hours understanding autism course. I'm like, how would you possibly understand, like it has taken, and that's why in our webinars, I suppose we break it down into, what is autism, what's not autism. And that's probably the first one someone should do, because it's like the foundation of breaking that down. And then we talk about like different elements like stimming, and then we talk about masking and anxiety and mental health and, lots of different things. And it's, you can't possibly explain like what it is to be autistic to somebody.
Yeah, it's like trying to get your head around what it is to be human in like a short period of time. Like the human experience of being autistic is so broad and varied and deep, and it's so important to have access to information that lets us know that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what would you say is like the main thing that maybe makes Awesome Training stand out from maybe other Awesome Training companies or providers?
Well, the fact that you're autistic led for starters. So not only autistic led, but amplifying other autistic voices. So there's multiple experiences of what it is to be autistic available, including from non-speaking autistic people using AAC, and autistic people presenting on a variety of topics that they are the true experts in. I think that's what really makes a difference, is it's not about an observer's experience of autism, it's about an autistic experience.
Yeah, and it's not just from one person. It's not, it is about
it's not
I think it's important to collaborate with other people. I think it's important for people to see different autistic people, to break all those kind of myths and stereotypes that are out there. If so, obviously you work with I know from children up to adults as well. But like, let's say a parent comes to you and maybe they think their child's autistic. Which course might you recommend for them to do? What might be the kind of stepping stone, or the first one that would be
that first one that I mentioned there, that what autism is and isn't. I have to say it's a challenging course, which I think is important. It's emotionally trying. I found it quite taxing emotionally, but in terms of the information provided, it was excellent. It's really about what autism is like as an autistic person, and I feel it really, like, people get really stuck in what autism is described as from the medical model or the deficit model, as opposed to looking at autism as like part of human diversity, like neurodiversity and biodiversity, all of that sort of stuff. It's all rolled into one big thing. But autistic people It's important to look at the history of where autistic people are coming from in terms of like suddenly being amplified, being able to have a voice in their own narrative because they were spoken over for so long. And I think, you know, a parent needs that information to see what their child might be experiencing, what they can do to support their child. Another one I think would be really beneficial is the autism and emotions one, because I think that's wildly misunderstood. And I think we have a tendency to pathologize autistic emotions rather than see them as just being human emotions responding to maybe stressful scenarios.
Yeah. And I think that at the very core of all of our training is autistics are human, you know, and people have this idea that there's autistic behavior when it's actually human behavior, but it's an autistic person doing it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, thank you for, and I mean, I think because I do feel for parents, because literally they get this very negative diagnosis, negative story. Some of them are told your child will never do this, that, and the other. And I just don't think that's fair on them. I don't think it's fair on the child. I don't think it's right. And I think we really, really need to work to change that, you know, and congratulate people when they have autistic children instead of, you know, blessing yourself and, you know, offering your condolences. It's ridiculous, you know, but and then we've put together actually a course, but we're going to run it as a live conference in March 21st, and it's specifically for parents of like kids who are newly diagnosed or maybe recently diagnosed, or, you know, parents who are waiting on a diagnosis and maybe are exploring, you know, this whole idea of autism, because I'm sure it's very overwhelming. I know it is, because I talk to a lot of parents, you know, to get all of this negative stuff and to kind of try and figure out what's right and what's not right. So, you know, we have a really good day totally focusing on their own mental health, how to, you know, communicate with your child, how to understand their communication, how to understand how autistic kids play and embrace that, you know, looking out for kind of the dangers and therapies that are out there, looking, you know, giving them helpful resources, and, you know, looking at how you can actually raise a confident autistic child who embraces and accepts who they are, because self-acceptance is so important. So I think, yeah, I mean, we're really just trying to, I suppose, provide the best information for people, the most helpful, because there's so much misinformation out there. And I suppose talking about misinformation, like we know that, and you know yourself from your own journey as an OT, you know, college and even CPD training for professionals is so behind the times. Like, how do you think we can change that? I suppose we'll talk about Ireland, because that's kind of our area, but like, how do you think we can change that in Ireland, Katie?
I think having more autistic input is going to be the big turning point. And I think the internet has kind of allowed some of that to happen, but I think there needs to be more. Like, I think a lot of our information about autism needs to come from autistic people as opposed to from, you know, experts who maybe are just, like I mentioned before, observing an autistic person and making judgments based on what they see. Like, an autistic person will be able to tell us a lot more about that lived experience, what it means to be autistic, what it means to be autistic in a neurotypical world. I think we need to see a lot more autistic people going into universities and teaching future healthcare providers about autism. I think we need to see even the idea that a chunk of the people studying to be healthcare providers are probably themselves autistic and maybe don't know it. I think it would be important to have that eye-opening experience, in that sense of, like, neurodivergent people should have neurodivergent health professionals, especially therapists, if that opportunity is available to them, because the neurotypical mind and the neurodivergent mind don't work the same way, and it's good to be able to have that connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there is no way to measure someone's internal state. The only people who can explain what it's like to be autistic are the people who experience being autistic.
Yeah.
And I find that as well, those of us who are training, you know, what we're not just talking about our own experiences, but we're also bringing in, you know, science, neuroscience, early childhood studies on early childhood development, biology, you know, just like sociology. We're kind of putting all of the stuff together to explain why we're seeing autistic people in the world in the way we are. A lot of us are very stressed, a lot of us are traumatized, and why that's happening. And, you know, a lot of autism training is very isolated. It's like talking about autism as a subject. And I mean, autism is not a subject. Autistic people are what we're talking about. And if you replace a lot of the things that people say about autism with the autistic people, then you begin to see, you know, kind of how the world views us, which is pretty negative. And really what we try and do is to change that narrative. And it needs to happen, because it's not working for a lot of people. And I know, like yourself as well, like, you know, when you've come across what autistic people are saying, there's that kind of sense of, oh, you know, that you've learned stuff that was not right and not helpful at some point.
And I had a lot of experiences in the past as like a new therapist that was kind of trying to find my feet as a clinician of, am I missing something? Like, what is the, when we look back on therapies from the past and we go, oh, that will never happen again because that's barbaric. But I think you also have to have a question in your mind all the time. If you're in a role that is supposed to help a person in therapeutically, you have to have that thought in your head all the time. Am I doing the right thing? Is this right? And the only way to know that is to get as much information as possible from the people who experience what you're trying to work with,
Yeah, that's so true. And I think it's how we define barbaric, because we have this idea of cutting people's brains out, lobotomies, and electroshocks and all this terrible therapies because they were physically harming the person. But now we really have to look at how we are mentally harming people and emotionally scarring people with some of the therapies, unfortunately. But that's a whole other discussion as well. But I suppose we do kind of warn people, I suppose, give out a warning about our training, because it is quite different. Yeah. It is going to, like you said earlier, it does challenge people. It can be emotional. So we are challenging people's worldview. We're challenging, I suppose, what they've already been told, and we know that that's difficult. So actually, at the moment, we're running a campaign. Don't come to us. we're highlighting, why we're so different, and maybe the things that people need to be aware of before they come to us, because it's not easy to challenge your thinking, and I know that, and our I suppose our training is very forward thinking. What would you say to people who maybe find themselves challenged by our message?
Well, I think that any sort of like strong learning experience is going to be challenging. I think that's part of the process. I think again that there's an element of maybe to unlearn things that you learned if they're not the best information now. I think challenging your biases, your perspective, your frame of reference is actually a very good thing. It's it's cognitive fluency. It's really important to check what you know and see if it's right, and then maybe change it based on what you now know. And I have to say my own experience of the AUsome training was quite emotional. I found a lot of it very I had a few cries during some of the webinars, but I feel that was just, I suppose, enhancing my learning experience. You got to feel your feelings, but also it was just, the information was challenging, but that was what made it so powerful.
And just, I suppose, one last thing, Katie, what way would you say that our training has maybe benefited you in your clinic, or influenced you?
Yeah.
What kind of effect has it had?
It's had quite a big effect, actually, and I'm really proud of that impact that it's had as well. So thank you for providing that information. It's really kind of changed my mind about how to view autistic behavior, like you mentioned. As an occupational therapist, we are concerned with meaningful occupation, and we don't get to decide what's meaningful to each individual. Each individual chooses what's important or valuable to them, and for autistic people, that might not be what a neurotypical person might expect. And that's okay. It's not wrong. Like, lining up toys is not a wrong way to play. Slapping is not a wrong way to express joy. And I think it's been a lovely experience to broaden my perspective like that and engage with my autistic clients however they come to me, however they choose to present themselves. It's made the process for me and for them, I think, a lot more enjoyable. There's a lot more joy in it. There's a lot more exploring of an individual's identity and learning to really embrace that and see it as a beautiful thing rather than as an other or as a problem, because it doesn't have to be.
That's just music to my ears. It does sound like that you're just supporting people to have a positive self-identity, and that's just so lacking in I think therapeutic approaches to autism. It's always about fixing it or changing it or teaching these people how to behave, instead of actually supporting that person to be themselves. And really, that is what autistic people need. We need
to be the most authentic version of yourself. We see that all the time in social media about being authentic, living your best life, being your best self. Being your best self is having access, first of all, knowing what your identity is, and then embracing it. That's true this true self-esteem is what I was trying to say there. Is you know yourself, you embrace yourself, then your self-esteem follows. And that's really important. It's so valuable.
Absolutely. Katie, thank you so much for your input, and thank you so much for talking to us today. And let's hope our journey together continues. Who knows what will happen.
Long may it continue.
Thanks, Katie.
Thanks, Evaleen.